You're listening to the Leading Healthy Creative Teams podcast with Matt Curtis. This is the podcast that helps you take your creative team from wherever you are today to healthy and effective.
Hey friends, welcome to the Leading Healthy Creative Teams podcast. This is episode 1. My name is Matt Curtis and I'm your host. I'm very excited about this podcast. It has been bouncing around in my mind for quite some time, but I didn't want to launch until I had a very clear trajectory on where we're going. And so we have that, and so now we will be going there. But first, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and also about what this podcast is designed to be. Back in 2004 was when I stepped into ministry full-time, graduated college, and needed to find a job. My wife and I were going to be getting married, and so I needed to find something. Applied everywhere but churches because I wasn't terribly interested in jumping into ministry. No overt aversion per se, maybe a little bit, but that was the door that got opened. And so started as a graphic designer at a church in Southern California, served in their outreach department, and if I'm honest, struggled right out of the gate. Probably 2 weeks in, I was lamenting, what have I done? Like, why am I here? Is this even something that I should be spending my time doing? What I realized over the years was that I was able to kind of feel a tension based on the way things were working or not working in the organization. And so unbeknownst to me, it was the beginning of a real passion developing for a healthy church and kind of broadly healthy church. My entire experience has been in the creative ministry side. So started as a graphic designer. After about 3.5 years, moved to a different church, was a communications director, still doing a lot of design and kind of execution, but began getting into the strategy side. And then after that, a couple years after that, started managing the team, the communications team, and then eventually the creative team, which was communications and productions, and then also pioneered our online ministry efforts. So basically from designer to leading the creative initiatives for the organization, that everywhere in between was kind of my background. And one of the things that I found over the years, my frustration, I always thought was born out of just like bad decision making, or, oh, that's frustrating, or I don't agree with that, conclusion, whatever. But I've actually realized, especially in kind of the later years, sitting in a different position, kind of looking down on what's going on in the organization, in the creative space, I actually realized there's a lot of unhealth in the creative arm of the church. Not just the ones I served in, but in many churches. And there's a lot of reasons as to why I think that's the case. On some levels, it doesn't necessarily matter why I think that's the case, because it is, like, it objectively exists. But there are a lot of different things that I have found over the years that have helped me identify it and also helped me deal with it. Because at the end of the day, you can't solve a problem that you can't see. It's just not a thing. Maybe occasionally you'll get lucky and you'll see something or you'll make a decision and it kind of unintentionally solves a problem. That's not how you become effective as a leader. You can't just go through life guessing your way through leadership decisions and hope that they accumulate over time into success. That's just not a smart way to lead. And so what I wanted to do through this podcast is I wanted to provide insights about the creative team specifically. One of the points of tension that I have found is that the creative arm is the only group of creatives in the organization. So let's say for a minute, you have a children's pastor, you have a youth pastor, you have an associate pastor, you have discipleship pastor, small groups pastor. There's all these different pastors. Functionally, they do different work, but they are united in the fact that they are pastors. There's a commonality in the sense that they are pastors. So that means that weddings, funerals, counseling, care, in some cases preaching, teaching the Word of God, church discipline, like there's a lot of things that unite them as a group, even though their functions are different, leading small groups, leading kids ministry, etc. The creative arm, however, is wildly unique because no one else in the organization is creative, And then on top of not being creative, they have no real language to communicate with creatives. And perhaps where a lot of the toxicity, appears, the creatives are in the same boat. They're talking about fonts. And the pastor's like, I don't care about fonts. So there's a lot of tension that develops in this relationship. And the reason I'm specifically focused on the creative ministry side, health and creative teams, is because when you have a creative team on your staff, in your organization, so much goes through it that toxicity spreads really fast if you don't address it and if you don't identify it. And so that's what this podcast exists to be. It exists to be the opportunity for you to gain skills in the areas of observation, and then also some tactics and some strategies around actually dealing with it too. And so the way that I kind of say it in the description of the show is it will help you, this podcast will help you learn what it takes to lead creatives well. So that's one component. It'll help you navigate toxicity and disagreement within your team. That's like the crisis state. Like you're in the worst possible situation when that toxicity already exists. And it'll help you build an environment where creatives can thrive. And so that's really the ambition here. So the framework of the show is going to be broken up into what I'm going to call mini series. They're not going to be mini seasons. They're not going to be fully separated. But I'm going to cover concepts over the course of multiple weeks. And it's going to let me focus on a very specific element, because part of where this stuff gets complicated, which is true of all leadership, not just creative leadership, but where this gets particularly complicated is when we have all of these, there's 4 nuanced things happening at once in a situation. So let's say somebody on your creative team is frustrated and gets into a verbal argument with one of your ministry staff. Okay, that could be the episode, but the reality is that there's probably a half dozen problems that are going on, often below the surface, and all you're seeing is the eruption. And so what I want to do is I want to dig deeper and not just say, don't tell your people not to yell at each other. Good job leading your team. That's not at all what this is about. Let's go deeper now and say, okay, what's happening now? And where are the problems happening so that we can identify the root causes? So I'm operating off of this concept. I believe that there are 4 cores to a healthy creative, okay? We're going to talk about those in the first series. That's what we're going to start with. What even is a healthy creative team? So we're going to get there in terms of unpacking the definitions around these things. But I believe that imagination, skills, heart, and systems, these 4 things have to exist and have to exist in balance in order for your team to be healthy. I have seen teams that are exceptionally gifted in some of these areas and a train wreck in other areas. And what it does is it tilts the balance in such a way that it eventually leads to toxicity. And so that's what I don't want for you. Now, you may be sitting there and you may be saying, well, that's neat that there are things that lead to toxicity, but I'm already there. I'm the mayor of toxic teams. We already have one. I'm going to tell you this, and you may not believe it, but I'm going to tell you it anyway. It doesn't matter where you are today. You can get to a healthy creative team. You absolutely can. I've done work on some pretty gnarly teams, and it was hard. I would say it was the hardest season of my life professionally. But through it, what I've learned is that is how God has gifted me, to navigate the things that come up in that space. That's where God has particularly skilled and gifted me personally. And so while it was hard, I could also see progress, and we came out the other end, and we had a really strong team at the end of it. And so no matter where you are, you can move through this. And then I would say, without knowing the specifics of your situation, just basing it on mine, I would also say, if you have inherited a team that is unhealthy, there's a chance that this may be an area where God wants you specifically to be doing restorative work. So yes, it's overwhelming. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's emotional. But that is also the nature of work that needs restoration, that needs healing. Broken people need healing. Healed people don't need healing. You know what I mean? So we're going to be getting into the muck and the mire in some of these things, but the church needs to. I mean, that's the bottom line. I've seen too many teams, too many toxic teams be tolerated rather than dealt with, and they need to be dealt with. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about what it looks like to see it and then to deal with it. And to deal with it in a way that is honoring to God. Not just, we're firing everybody, though sometimes removing people from the team is the answer. We're not going to be reckless and punitive in this. We're going to be kind. We're going to be gracious. We're going to represent God well in the way that we do what we do. So that's what that's to you who are in a team or managing a team that is just not working right. Now, maybe you're thinking, I feel like our team's pretty good. Well, then fantastic. Keep doing what you're doing. Sustain it. But also, there will be opportunities for you to course correct toxicity before you get to toxicity. So there will be signs that you're drifting into unhealth. Great. So then let's have a conversation about recognizing those early and then course correcting so that you can remain healthy as a team. So that's what this is about. And so if you find yourself wrestling with how to solve the creative arm of the church, if you find yourself wrestling with really even interacting effectively and meaningfully with the creative team that you have, these conversations are going to be very helpful specifically for you. Now, the nature of what I do, I obviously am creating this kind of level of content that's going to be generally helpful to people. Hopefully, you're going to hear some episodes that really resonate with you specifically even. But the work that I do is I come in and I assess at a very deep level what is the holistic view of things. What are the problems in imagination? What are the limitations in skill? What are the issues with heart? And where are systems not working and broken? So that the organization can holistically repair calm back to the balance. And so some teams are just a little bit off kilter. And some teams, it's just like, man, you guys are really strong in a variety of areas. In 3 of the 4 areas, man, systems are just struggling right now. So let's talk through how we can get some systems to work well and then train, develop, implement. So that's the nature of what I do. And so sometimes you'll hear examples that are specific to the context in which I'm serving. And so some of these situations may be a little bit gnarly, like the example that I share about, one person having a verbal argument with another one, yelling at each other, in the hallway. I mean, that's not a fictionalized story, I'll just put it that way. And so I've seen some things over the years, and I will continue to see some things, and that's really what motivates me personally, and also Lunchtime Heroes, the business, to be investing in healthy creative teams. So building healthy creative teams is what we're about, and that is what this podcast is about as well. So I'm really excited for you to be a part of this. I really want to hear from you. I want to know what specific challenges you're dealing with. And so as much as I have the roadmap laid out and, I'm developing content along those lines, this will continually be evolving because it can't just be, a tone-deaf pontification. I want this to be a dialogue as best as we can. And so if you have issues, specific challenges that you're running into, shoot me an email, matt@lunchtimeheroes.co. That's my email address. I would love to hear from you, and I would love to know what plagues you in terms of the health of your creative team in your church. All right. So that's what this is about. I'm really excited to get going into this first mini series, which is going to be talking about what even is a healthy creative team. I want to lay the foundation for you in terms of what you can expect a healthy team to look like, and also lay a little bit of the foundation for you in terms of assessing, I don't know if we are healthy or not. How can I tell? What are some of those things that I can look for and see? And then I also have a tool that I've created specifically to help assessment happen, and I will be sharing that in the first episode of this new series as well.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Leading Healthy Creative Teams. This podcast is just one of the ways Lunchtime Heroes helps build healthy creative teams in the church. Stay up to date on the latest by signing up for the Creative Bites email at lunchtimeheroes.co.